Welcome back to the Hard Skills Show, where we take a deep dive into the most challenging soft skills required to navigate leadership uncertainty, complexities, and change today and into the future. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu, psychologist, leadership consultant, and founder of TowerScope. In today's episode, I'm excited to introduce Linda Marsanico as one of the newer show hosts on TalkRadio.nyc. For those of you who don't know, my show, The Hard Skills, is hosted by TalkRadio.nyc, and so is Linda's. And TalkRadio.nyc is a global live podcasting station that offers something different from the mainstream media. It's focused on empowering, inspiring, uplifting, and educating our audiences, and importantly, offsetting the fear and negativity that is so common in traditional programming. As an alternative to typical talk radio, we focus on content that helps you feel better about yourself and the world around you, while also educating you on the topics that you're interested in. Now, I had one of our other hosts, Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, on the show last year. So now I get to introduce Linda, and we try to cross-collaborate whenever possible. When I saw the connection between her work and mine, I thought this could really be interesting. The first immediate thought was resiliency. We come at it from different ways, and whichever road you take towards girding your resiliency right now, it's more important than ever before. But as she and I were talking before the show even started, I started thinking, oh my goodness, we might have more in common than I realized. So first, let me introduce to you Linda Marsanico, which I just love to say your whole entire name, Linda Marsanico. It just sounds beautiful. She is the host of the A Train to Sedona. Linda initially trained as a social psychologist, but transitioned to writing, speaking, and coaching about spirituality and about love and compassion as a road to a joy-filled life. Now, Linda herself sees herself as a healer, and she uses various modalities to get there, including Reiki and Vortex, integrated energy. Her podcast is named right after her book, The A Train to Sedona. She's got the book, she's got the podcast, and she shares her journey in that book into this space, and we're going to hear more about that today. So welcome, and great to have you on the show, Linda.
Thank you so much, Mira, for a wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be with you.
Yeah, me too. And so Linda, I would love to work our way backwards first for a second. I was thinking about, how you made this transition from social psychologist into what you do now, which is, you call yourself a spiritual coach, but you do a lot of kind of healing work. And I will just say that when I think about spirituality, because I come at this from, a very heady, researchy background and training. So to me, even though I talk about soft skills, sometimes I think spirituality is the most squishy soft skill I could possibly imagine. And with psychology, we have a lot of listeners who are obviously interested in psychology, just because we're talking about, soft skills and things like that. And there are lots of different types of psychologists and subspecialties. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I respecialized in organizational development and team development psychology, right? And those are just two flavors. Clinical psychology is more focused on mental health intervention and treatment. Organizational psychology is more focused on kind of workplace dynamics, employee engagement, teamwork, how to drive positive outcomes, healthy work environments, things like that. You also have cognitive psychology, and they end up in lots of very researchy, experiences. Educational psychologists who focus on education. Social psychology, I think, is probably, what people don't realize, is probably one of the most interesting spaces to be in, because everybody wants to know what is happening in this group, what is happening socially, what is happening in society, why do we have in groups and out groups? All of that is social psychology and well beyond that. So I would love to hear kind of like the whole sort of transition. How did you get into social psychology, but then how did you move beyond that into the work that you do now?
I'd like to start in the year of 2001. Just before 9/11, I was interested in joining a spiritual group. I was searching for meaning, something deeper. And then 9/11 happened. And being a New Yorker, looking over the river and seeing smoke, and it was awful for all of us. Life changed immediately. So I felt bereft, and I joined one of the oldest co-ops in the country and the world, I believe, the Park Slope Food Co-op, because I wanted to be part of something bigger than I was and something collaborative. And it's like the United Nations of diversity. So I joined the co-op, and then I joined the spiritual group. We met for meditation every week, and mostly women, some men, began to talk about things. Me with my PhD, I knew nothing about their conversations. And I've joked, it was like I was speaking Russian, they were speaking Chinese. I voraciously read the metaphysical literature, the work of Greg Braden, David Hawkins, Wayne Dyer, Matsuri Emoto, and it goes on. Neil Donald Walsh. And I was going to the meditations and getting Reiki from the clairvoyant healer. And I was feeling very loving and compassionate. And I wanted to share that experience. So I wrote the book. And this is going back, the book I started in 2010.
Mm.
And for various reasons, which we could go into, it wouldn't get published. Prior to the spiritual group, I was a social psychologist and I wanted to get licensed. So I went into postgraduate center, a very lovely place to learn about theories. I spent 3 years, got a certificate to work with children, families, and adolescents.
Mhm.
So I was working in psychotherapy, but the work in the group was informing me. And I wanted to bring metaphysics, Reiki, integrated energy, vortex energy into the sessions. And the scope of practice in New York State is kind of narrow. Mental health, psychotherapy doesn't include Reiki and metaphysicism. So I kind of made a metamorphosis into coaching
Mhm.
and became very interactive and directive. And I said to my clients, my major goal for you is to love yourself. I said, I learned all these theories to put a label on you, but my goal for you is to love yourself. And then we had other goals. And it built from there. And I found myself working more holistically, and it just resonated with me. It's my style.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, first of all, it sounds like it was an absolutely transformative experience.
Really.
And that usually we find these moments in crisis, right? When we are faced with questioning the meaning of life, all our existential questions. Why am I here? Why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
Why did this happen to us, here? All of those questions. And it really forces you to take perspective, and to think, what is important to me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like for you, you were already kind of there. And then 9/11 happened and it sort of catalyzed
Mm-hmm.
what you were seeking and you found it. Is that right?
I would say yes, yes. You
Yeah,
really put the nail on the head.
that's amazing. So um, I'm curious if you're willing to share, what were you seeking right around that time that this filled so well for you?
I was seeking, as I said, greater meaning through interaction, through community. The co-op provided that, and the group did. There was a lot that we had in common. It was the beginning of really love and compassion for me as a focus, choosing love over fear.
Mm,
And
mhm.
when I wrote the book, my first editor said, "You have to have a blog." And I said, "I don't want to have a blog. It's too much work." So, so I presented the book, rejection after rejection. And I said, "She's right." And I developed the blog. And I thought, well, what will be the focus? It's a spiritual website, but how shall I focus? It took me 6 months. And finally, I said, it's going to focus on love and compassion. Because when we are loving and compassionate, we're spiritual.
Mm. And that, I think, is the connection I don't think I ever made. And I think the reason is probably that in our society, we confuse spirituality and religion.
Yes.
And when we confuse that, sometimes we lose sight of the purpose of spirituality, which is a deeper connection to the sort of higher order of why we're here and what our
Mhm.
purpose is and what feeds us as humans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so love over fear, that speaks to me, you know. Um Compassion at a time when we're seeing less and less ability to demonstrate compassion,
Hmm.
that speaks to me.
Hmm.
And the goal of loving yourself obviously speaks to me because, you know, you and I were talking before the show and we were talking about, you know, supporting women. And when I support women in leadership, you support, you know, women in all walks of life and in all their stages. And um, you know, the unlearning of messages about not loving ourselves,
Hmm.
and only loving others, or being here for others' needs and letting go of loving ourselves are, you know, things that I think we're both really passionate about. All of this speaks to me. So I guess you're defining me as a spiritual person, which I never thought of myself to be. Isn't that funny? So tell me more now. Um, Tell me more about the love over fear.
In the third dimension, we have the ego. And the ego is fear-based. Now, in spirituality, when you think of the other aspect of life is beyond the body in the third dimension. It's all about love. Love is all there is. Now, in that explanation, you have love and you have fear. Fear includes all those emotions that we experience in functioning in life all the time. We write books about all the feelings, but spiritually, it's love or fear. And when we go into fear, as is so prominent today, we pick up the energy of the angst of the planet. We go into it and we feel it, and I see it with my clients, I see it with myself. So to choose love is to say, well, I'm going to kind of hang out in a different place. I'm going to be positive. It's not that I'm going to ignore what my issues are, what I need to work on, but I'm not going to dwell on the politics or the problems of what's going on. So, for example, I recently wrote that when I'm feeling afraid, and often I do with the situation in this country, I note that I'm feeling afraid. I feel the hormones and I step back and I surround myself with loving energy. It could be an ascended master, it could be love, it could be nature, whatever you want to surround yourself with. It could be violet light, and I hang out there. And I do that when I'm afraid, rather than dwell and create more negativity for myself and others, because we're all connected. And we feel, the butterfly effect, that the butterfly in the Ukraine flutters its wings, and we feel it in Texas.
Yeah. Um, as you're talking about what it could look like when you're reading the news, you're experiencing the fear, and then you're sort of taking, a step back from it,
Mm-hmm.
I want to separate out for people the difference between avoidance and engagement,
Mm-hmm.
because um, often when we fear, right, and this is again coming from a clinical psychology perspective with anxiety, right,
Mm-hmm.
the treatment for anxiety is address the avoidance, the thing that you're avoiding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And avoidance is the thing that holds you in fear.
Yes.
It holds the fear. And so I would love to hear more about how you think about, even if I'm taking a step back from, the situation in order to re-experience love, it's not necessarily like avoiding life, right? Or what's happening.
Correct.
How do you see it as still staying engaged?
I have a friend who has turned off all of her news programs. She doesn't want to know anything. I look at the news to get a sense of what's happening, and then I turn it off. I don't have a television, but I have, first thing in the morning, if I open up my phone, I hear what the president is doing, I hear what the stock market is doing, but I don't want to do that first thing. But I can check and hear a synopsis of the news, but I don't stay there. If I feel afraid, I perform that ritual that I just told you about. But if I'm afraid with other things, there's other work for me to do. I may need to grieve using Kubler-Ross's grieving stages. I may need to journal. I may need to talk to my psychologist about it. I may reach out to a friend. Issues are not to be avoided. They need to be dealt with in a strategic way. There's a time, so I have a four-stage model when I work with clients. One is know what you're thinking. And if you don't like what the thoughts are, don't fight with them. Replace them with kind thoughts. And then two is know what your habitual behavioral response is. And if that doesn't satisfy you, let's plan to change the way you react. Then I look at the childhood of the person, not to dwell, but to understand the influences. We work on mantra, meditation, and we let go of what doesn't serve us. That's the
Mm,
four-stage model. And um, we work because life is so challenging and is always presenting us with challenges.
yeah,
So there's always work to do.
I can so hear the clear integration, Linda, between psychological principles of, behavior change, thought patterns, reframing, cognitive behavioral, stuff, and the sort of complementary addition of the higher order themes that we don't often infuse in therapy, which is like meaning making
Mhm.
and um, you know, how am I like loving myself, and how am I caring for myself, and how am I um, you know, using other practices, other supplementary practices to also heal, recover, repair,
Yes.
calm, focus,
Hmm.
all of these things, right? And I think a lot of times therapy stays in the head,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so like I do hear the holistic, like get back into your body. What else does your body need? What's missing in
Hmm.
addition to kind of like reframing, some habit changing, all of the head stuff, right?
And I also exercise myself and I encourage my clients to do that because we need to have a healthy body. If we don't have health, it really overshadows our presence.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things that I heard around um, engagement is there are lots of little actions you can take. You don't have to take the same action in the same way, and it doesn't have to be a big action to make a
Hmm.
big impact, right?
Right. Right.
So I heard things like, and I talk about this in just how to stay present and be there for your team or your organization as a leader. And the first thing is slow down enough to process how you feel about it first. You really can't be there for other people if you haven't processed the effect that it's having on you and how you feel about it and what you want to do with that, right? So some people don't think that's an action. It is an action to slow down and just reflect.
It's a very important action, which many people do not engage in. They go
Right.
right into reacting in anger or in whatever is on their mind. But to step back allows us to decide, it gives us mastery. How do I wish to respond to this?
Yes.
And we have a repertoire when we
Right.
do that.
That's right. That's right. There are days when so the practice that I'm kind of using, and I think I can connect it to the how am I loving on others, right? Or how am I demonstrating some compassion, or how am I sort of like using the time, is I try very hard, if I'm going to read the news and it gets me agitated, I try very hard to do one thing about it. So I don't leave it there, right? I don't let it sit there in me. I do something. And some days I feel like the only thing I could do is share a couple of feelings online. And I think that's plenty. Like, I think people resonate with, wow, she's got a lot of feelings there, and that's okay. Other times I will contact some of my, colleagues or friends and send them, some piece of information or some action that they could take or whatever. Other days, I decide I need rest and I'm just going to watch a mindless show, right? Other times I'm going to spend a little bit more time with, my husband walking around the block, right? But each one of these helps me sort of like do something with the energy. And I'm curious, because you do a lot of energy work. I'd love to hear kind of like how you use that to sort of recognize when people have something that they need to sort of recognize about their energy or do something with their energy, or I know you do a lot of energy work. Reiki is a little bit of that. Would love to hear more about that.
Yes, I think taking action is a very important step. Now, there are times when I do a lot of work on Zoom, and my client is really having a hard time. And we have an agreement, and they know that I am a Reiki person, I do vortex, they know all that. I'll start sending them energy. I'll do the necessary preparation and send it to them. If I feel that they're being very negative, there are times, if I know someone very well, I'll say, that's incorrect thinking. Now, that's a very bold response, only for a person who has a lot of resilience and knows me very well. You're incorrectly thinking. Have you considered it this way? How do you know it's that way? I'll have a dialogue about that. I might encourage them to exercise, to reach out to friends. There are a number of ways, depending upon the situation and the strengths of the client. But energy is precious.
Yes.
It's, for us in the body, it's finite. You talked about resting a moment ago. I take naps during the day. A 20-minute nap is like a power nap. And I remember one male client about 15 years ago. I discussed a meditation or a visualization. And I said, well, tell me, what was your experience with that? He said, it was like a power nap.
Mm.
Now, that's in the middle of a day, in the middle of a work day. Take a power nap, whether it's a meditation or actually being on the couch.
Amazing. Amazing. Linda, I just realized we got so into it so fast that I'm way past our ad break. So we are going to get into this ad break. You are listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Linda Marsanico, the A Train to Sedona is her podcast and her book. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on TalkRadio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Linda Marsanico of the A Train to Sedona podcast and book. We have a little segment here before our next ad break, but I really want to keep going with this energy work because as much as I don't talk about spirituality, energy is something that I do focus on a lot because like you said, we only have so much, so many reserves. And sometimes a lot of times people put their energy into things that don't make them feel good, that steal away from who they are, what they want to be, how they want to show up, all the things. So I would love to hear more from you about how you sort of all of the different ways that you explore energy work with people and kind of the most common things that come up for you when you're kind of starting to explore that. Oh, and you're on mute again. Mm-hmm.
I'm so involved in energy that I'm not thinking about my speaking. Some of my clients come in and they've never meditated. And I suggest a 2 to 3 minute meditation. Some clients are not ready to meditate. They're too in their mind, in an intellectual way, in a concrete way. And I suggest a mantra. Because a mantra, and my favorite prefix is I am. It's very powerful in the spiritual community. And you can attach something very constructive. I am loved. And some clients will say, but I don't feel loved. I said, well, you could fake it until you make it. Or you could develop, I am working on feeling loved.
Mm.
And a mantra could be Om, it could be I am. My preference is the I am. And it serves to focus the mind when thoughts come in that we don't want. So if something happens to me and something is just rolling around in my mind, I'll use a mantra again and again so that eventually the only thing on my mind is the mantra. And that relaxes everything, blood pressure, pulse, if you can keep your mind focused and not out of control. So a lot of clients do meditate. Sometimes we'll meditate during a session, although a lot of times clients want to talk to me. They just want, a lot of us don't have anyone to listen to us. And that's a big part of, Freud said, really, listening he said the relationship is the most important thing. I think listening feels like feeling loved. If it's like acceptance. And with all the technology and the phones and the texting, people don't communicate so much anymore. And I think a lot of people are isolated. I think millennials and the Gen X's, the younger ones who have grown up with practically a phone in their hand. And they really need to develop skills that allow them to interact. We need that. We're social beings. So I do encourage interaction. What else for energy? I might say, if you're feeling afraid, just surround yourself with violet light. It's a very powerful energy. And in my sheet for higher vibration living, which I have on my website, which I'll talk about later, it has 7 exercises to bring vibration to a higher degree and to bring the focus to the present moment. So if I'm feeling, or my clients are feeling preoccupied, distracted, worried, getting into the present moment is like the mantra. So I get into the present moment, and it's very effective.
Yeah, I love all of these. Listening feels like feeling loved. I just
Mm-hmm.
totally adore that. And you're right. When we don't feel listened to, we might replace it with all kinds of other things to
Oh,
feel
yes.
loved
Mm-hmm.
that are not actually long-term helpful to us or healthy for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, go ahead.
Spending too much, drinking too much, eating too much, just being very off balance
Mm-hmm.
to try to feel, to replace that emptiness. And
Yeah.
the only way to heal that void, and I say this, I think of the void, which is big today. I think of it as being on a bell curve. Roughly 80% of us have void, right? And then you have the tails, no void and all void. And so the only way to heal it is to really look within and work on those issues to feel full, to feel. So that's why my first goal for everyone
Mm-hmm.
is for them to love themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a million thoughts going on in my mind, but I know our engineer is yelling at me to go back to my ad breaks here. So we are going back to the ad break. You're listening to me, Dr. Mira Brancu, on the Hard Skills with my guest today, Dr. Linda Marsanico of the A Train to Sedona podcast, also on TalkRadio.nyc, as well as book author of the A Train to Sedona. And we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Linda Marsanico of the A Train to Sedona podcast. Okay, so we were talking about listening, feeling like feeling loved. and how many people right now feel more isolated than ever before. I often feel like we are hyper connected and yet in a sea of disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about, how it's important to sort of make sure that you're not misusing the way that you're engaging in the world, whether online or in person, in a way that it's replacing the emptiness with things that aren't loving for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminded me of kind of where we started with the ego being fear-based, right? And how we see a lot of sort of an increase in, and I'm going to get real semi-political here, but we're seeing an increase in authoritarianism, and by people who are filling their sort of ego emptiness
Mm-hmm.
with fear, who are using fear-based methods, who are instilling fear in order to, in my opinion, get love in all of kind of the wrong ways. And when I think about resiliency at the individual level and societal level, it is all about not succumbing to that, to that kind of like fear-based emptiness, but rather leaning into love and compassion, loving ourselves, but also loving others, having compassion for ourselves and also having compassion for others. I think it's a really, really hard skill to master,
Right.
develop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what do you see? What does it actually take to develop this? How long does it take? How hard is it? I know that it's different for everybody.
Yes.
But what do you see that it takes really?
It takes a lot of work. And we interact all the time. And we have reactions to those interactions. So in taking responsibility for myself and having an intention to be on my path, I ask myself, I don't like the way this feels. This person said this and I feel this way. Instead of blaming the other person, what does this say about me? What can I learn? Do I have to change something? And I go within, because the journey to love and compassion and eventually enlightenment is a journey within. And we have so many opportunities when we're willing to look at them. And I feel, now this is a spiritual perspective, that universe will continue to send the same situations to us, not to punish us, but to help us to grow. And some people, now eventually, we all get to the same place. But some of us now are more evolved, and some of us we all have a lot of work to do. My father used to say, you're in private practice. When do you get practice to get perfect? So there's no end. There's only a beginning and more plateaus and more learning. And I find that the issues become more nuanced and challenging. So the more that I grow, the more that is expected of me. And sometimes I fail. And I pick myself up, dust myself off. There's a song that says that, and I start all over again. And the thing is, the self-talk is very important. And I say, okay, I made a mistake. If I were not speaking to myself correctly, I might say, oh, I made a mistake. I can't do anything right. I just feel miserable. But I can correct that by saying, I made a mistake. I'm going to do it differently next time, and I'll learn from it. There's a lot of when I say that, even I feel the difference in the energy.
Mm-hmm.
You see? And the self-talk is so important. And we can learn to do that when we're willing to do it. And
Yeah.
for those who are not so pleasant, they're here to teach us something. So the idea is, I remember working on the issue of my mother in counseling and spiritual circles, and I thought, I actually did it. I am loving and I've forgiven and I'm better at this. I go to a retreat and a woman triggers something about my mother, and I thought, I have more work to do. So the idea is that I can see my mother, whom I love dearly. I could see her, as I joke, warts and pimples, but I see the beauty around her. And that's what we need to do to those who are hateful, as hard as that is. We are all children of the same creator. And rather than send hate, because if I send hate out there, I'm holding it against myself as well. You see, the poison I'm putting out, I'm drinking myself.
Yeah. And I also think that, why perpetuate something that you already don't like, right? Why would we want to do that? As you're talking, it's reminding me of this other podcast that I heard, and let me see if I could pull it out quickly on my phone here. I probably won't be able to find it fast enough. Let me see. Oh yeah, A Therapist Can't Say That is this podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I don't know it.
No.
Whose
Okay.
podcast is it?
A Therapist Can't Say That. And one of the episodes that I really loved that you're reminding me of is about spirituality and how the, origins of therapy came from partly mysticism within the Jewish community, right? There was a lot of Jewish therapists, Freud, folks. And when it was brought to the US, they started sort of doing a lot more sort of empiricism and, kind of like removing the mysticism from it. And yet, when you are kind of doing therapy, there's a lot of storytelling and there's a lot of sort of embodiment and there's a lot of like higher order experiences around it. And I think you're bringing that back. you probably should hear it out and see, but that's what I'm picking up on as kind of what you're bringing to it, because you're saying you're using the same concepts as, kind of a traditional US therapist, CBT trained, kind of behavioral, therapy trained person would, like reframing, your thoughts, identifying when you're having, thoughts that are, creating cognitive fallacies or biases or those kinds of things, and stopping yourself and recognizing. But you're adding another piece to it that I think is often missing from why would we do this, right? Like, what is the purpose of retraining myself, right? And you're adding if your goal is to bring more love into the world, or if your goal is compassion or to be a better person or to love yourself, that's why you would do all of this stuff. That's why you would engage in this kind of work.
Absolutely. Yes. And our work is very special work. I think it's very gratifying. It brings me a lot of joy. And I wrote the book as a memoir. It's a memoir to have my voice be heard, but to inspire other people's journey, to make it more efficient, to make it more clear that this is one way you might consider doing it. One of my clients happened to pick it up, and she said, Linda, it's a guidebook. She said, it's a page turner. I said, I'm deeply touched. So helping others and making the world a better place is a worthy goal. And of course, developing ourselves is the way to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're reaching another ad break. This is our last ad break. And when we come back, I want to get into some of those practical tips you started sharing around girding resiliency. You started sharing around meditation and mantras and things like that. I'd love to hear a little bit more. You have a tip sheet. So that's what we're going to do when we come back from this ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on TalkRadio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu of The Hard Skills, and Dr. Linda Marsanico of the A Train to Sedona, our sister podcast on our show through TalkRadio.nyc. So we've been talking about all the different ways that you can gird resiliency through various spiritual practices. And I'd love to hear some tips from you. And I want to start with a couple that you already started with, which was meditation and mantras. Meditation, you mentioned, can be a little bit harder for people who are in their head a lot or feel like, kind of they have to move all the time. That's me. And I had learned that you don't have to, number one, meditate in the way that you like sometimes see on TV, like you sit there for 20 minutes trying to get deeper and deeper into, some kind of state. You can meditate while you walk and just focus on every step and every breath, right? And, I thought that was, really helpful, and that it's not about judging how well or terrible you're meditating, right? Because that's beside the point. The point is you're noticing and then you're letting it go, and you're noticing and then you're letting it go. But an even easier one that you mentioned is mantras. And I actually love mantras. I have shared on the show, I had a mantra for 10 years. Good enough is good enough. And it was my way of beating out my perfectionism. Every time I noticed it, I'd say, good enough is good enough, Mira, let it go. And yeah, it took 10 years, but like it worked. Every year it got better and better. And now I wish I was a little bit more perfectionistic again. It will never happen. I never want it back again. But, every once in a while I'm like, boy, that could have been better.
No, I share that as well, Mira. I want to be perfect, which is ridiculous. There's no idea of perfection. Everyone has a different perspective on it. And I used to say, oh, I made a mistake and feel horrible. So, and now I am a member of Toastmasters, and I was so distracted. I became the Toastmaster for the evening. To be the Toastmaster, there are so many things happening. You have to be like this. I was terrible in front of people, and I'm so seasoned. And I said to myself, you made a mistake. Be focused the next time. And it was a big plateau for me to reach.
Wow. That's huge. That's huge.
It was.
So, tell us any other practical tips that people could start thinking about now, based on everything that we've talked about? They could sort of start thinking how to gird their resiliency using spiritual practice.
Breathing is very important. My favorite breathing technique is to breathe in 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8. Now, we could do it if you should wish to do it. I want to say that appropriate breathing like that oxygenates the cells, reduces blood pressure, reduces the pulse, and most importantly, engages the parasympathetic nervous system to come and calm the sympathetic nervous system. So I've said recently, it doesn't matter whether you're giving a presentation, a talk, whether you're seeing the love of your life, breathe. And we have that ability. It's just that we need to practice. So 4-4-8 is one. There's 4 square breathing. Some people do 4-4 and something else and something else. I like the simplicity of 4-4-8. Some people like this 4-by-4-by-4. This is a major strategy because when I began the A Train to Sedona broadcast, the first time I thought, oh my goodness, it was like trial by fire. And I would breathe, and it would keep my anxiety, my stress level at a certain point because I was breathing. My body was doing what I was making it do, and it helps so much. Now,
I wonder if that one, I'm just curious, is part of it also that you are paying attention to something other than all of your other thoughts? Is that sort of like part of it?
It's all part of the same thing, really. Having a disciplined mind. I think that the fastest computer known to us is here. Now, spiritually, this is the brain and this is the mind. So the brain is the receptor and the mind is here. In meditation, we first get out of the thinking mind. We start then to relax and we go to a deeper place. And it's like being at the gym where you're repeating like a bicep, but you can't do it just once or twice. You do it so that the muscle develops. And with all of this, it takes an intention and an attitude of responsibility. So with the willingness, there's all these wonderful techniques. Staying in the present moment is so effective because when we're stressed or distracted, I at times could have the mind just fly. It's going. Linda, step back and get into the present moment. And I can use a mantra. I could breathe, but I need to focus because I want a disciplined mind.
Yeah. Those are great. How can people find out more about you? Because I know you have a lot of different ways of working with people. Where can they go? How can they find out more?
My website, lindamarsanico.com. And on the website, yes, that's my cheat sheet for high vibration living. You can download it for free on the landing page.
Nice.
And you can join my mailing list. You can download it and have it for yourself. Because in these very unpredictable times, we need all the skills in our toolkit to be resilient. We can build up resilience. Some of us are born with it. I wasn't. And so I developed it. You can also buy a copy of my book on the website, lindamarsanico.com, on Buy the Book page, which is on the far right. And you can buy a signed copy, which I will mail to you personally. Or you can buy an unsigned copy from retail and bookstores. If you wanted to read the first 7 pages for free, you could go to Amazon.com for that. I also, on one of the pages, I think the Contact Linda page, I have a free meditation, the Earth Sky meditation, which is a meditation, that's it, that I learned in Sedona, which is a beautiful mingling of Father Sky, masculine energy from the sky, bringing it into the body and delving into Mother Earth and bringing the feminine energy up to commingle, because we can act from the feminine side, which is said to be here, the masculine side on the right, but rather in the middle. So we want to act from here, where we have all of our possibilities.
Amazing. What is one thing out of all the things we talked about that you want people to take away from you today?
I think millennials can get work that they like and even love. I think we've done a lot of prep work. I'm a baby boomer. And so that's what I see for the millennials. And I see the millennials changing the economy and changing the workplace. Get work that you like, that you love, so you can jump out of bed in the morning to meet your colleagues. And I also want to say that compassion is an everyday experience, and our spiritual journey is all about us.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Linda. And audience, what did you take away? What's one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from Linda? Share it with us on LinkedIn and at TalkRadio.nyc so we can cheer you on. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, all over the place. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague, leave a review. And if you're also looking for more personalized support or leadership or team coaching, head to towerscope.com. Actually, go towerscope.com to schedule a consultation. Thank you to TalkRadio.nyc for hosting. Together, we'll navigate the complexities of leadership and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me today, Linda Marsanico, on this journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Loved having you on. This is Dr. Mira Brancu signing off with Dr. Linda Marsanico. Up until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills. Bye, everybody.